Welcome to Teaching Peace, the podcast of Brooklyn Peace Center. I'm your host, Jason Storbakken, and in each episode, we explore stories of liberation, transformation, and community, rooted in the belief that peace is something we practice, not just something we hope for. Today, we turn our attention inward to a performance arts project that's been quietly unfolding within our own walls for the past 2 years. Little by little, a residency and performance series founded by Isabella Thorpe-Woods at Brooklyn Peace Center. Since its founding, Little by Little has welcomed 7 unique resident artists, each bringing their own vision, voice, and vulnerability. It's a space shaped not by urgency or production, but by care, slowness, and the courage to stay with the questions. Bella joins us to reflect on what it means to curate from the margins, to make room for unfinished work, and to trust the slow process of building peace and community through performance, little by little. Let's begin. We're here with Isabella Thorpe-Woods from Little by Little. What experiences, artistic, academic, personal, shaped your practice? And how did they lead you to found Little by Little at Brooklyn Peace Center?
In the UK, I wasn't sure I was going to go to university, actually. I considered going to dance or drama school, or just, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't think I was an academic person until my last year of exam. I was actually quite badly behaved in school, so no one expected I was going to go into higher education. But I managed to get straight A's and went to university in Brighton. I just wanted to be on the beat. But also
Brighton Beat.
Brighton Beat. The point of going to that university was informed by a friend's dad who told me I would like it because the drama degree, which I did there, was ran by his friend called SJ, who did her master's degree here in New York. And that course just completely changed all my interests. It was very specific to experimental performance art, new writing of plays. There was a huge focus on international art making and sharing. So my context of performance and dance wasn't just specific to Europe and the UK. It also happened to have this huge chapter on America, but New York specifically. So these were things New York specifically became a huge interest, academic and artistic interest of mine when I was 18. And I continued looking into it until I was 21 and graduated. I then worked in magazine journalism for 2 years. I have 2 brothers who are actors. And while I always wanted to be in performance, maybe do acting myself, I decided not to do it because I know how hard it is. And I, for some reason, thought being in journalism was sensible.
Print has seemed to have shifted, and now it's all digital. So the arts are in your family.
They're very much in my family. So I have 4 older brothers, and all of us but one are artists. The one who's not is a scientist.
Oh, wow. Whole other end of the spectrum.
Exactly, yeah. But I ended up quitting magazine journalism because I didn't like it. I love writing, but I didn't like writing in magazine journalism. And I was nannying full-time in London for a whole year during the pandemic. I had to move home. And I suddenly realized I wanted to return to university, which was never something I anticipated. And the person, SJ, who was the reason I went to my course in Brighton, recommended I look at a course at NYU.
At Tisch.
At NYU Tisch.
Yeah, great school.
Exactly. The course is performance studies. And admittedly, I didn't know it was in New York at first. Because it was pandemic times and it was virtual open houses. And I didn't manage to make the virtual open house because I was nannying. But I got an email anyway because I'd signed up. And it had been signed off by this scholar called Andre Lepecki, who's a dance scholar who I was very interested in during my undergraduate degree. He writes about the exhausted body quite a lot and looks at counterculture revolutions in South and North America during the 60s and 80s, which was a specific interest for me.
Yeah.
And I realized why she'd told me to look at that course. So I then returned, looked at it, realized it was in New York, had this window of time where I was nannying and freelance writing, and had a month to just like really give a go at an application. And not only did I get in, but they gave me a scholarship.
Wow, wonderful.
But yeah, I'd never been to America. So
Wow.
I came straight from the UK to America for my master's degree in September 2021, and was then in proximity to all the things I was interested in and the people that I'd read the books of who were teaching this course.
That's the best kind of program to get into, to study under the people who you already admire and read.
Yeah, it was the most life-changing thing that's ever happened to me.
Similar for me. When I went to graduate school, I went to Union Theological Seminary. I went there because James Cone, father of liberation theology, Dr. Cornel West, I mean, amazing folks were there.
Amazing.
I'm like, I want to learn from them.
That's how I ended up in New York, and then I continued nannying in New York. The reason that this relates to Little by Little is I think Little by Little comes from two specific trainings. One is a training to do with inclining towards another, which is my nannying, like the inclination towards another person rather than a self-interested kind of navigation through the world, and noticing what's in your immediate surroundings and the people who are there, because you have to when you're looking after a child. And then the other interest is DIY art scenes, and specifically performance in religious spaces or religious architectures in New York, say movement research in Judson Church,
Right.
or dance space in St. Mark's. I was really desiring to make a similar model, but in Brooklyn.
Right.
And
And for
then-
those who they can't see us,
Yeah.
we're sitting in the main hall of the sanctuary of Brooklyn Peace Center, which was originally a synagogue and then a church and now a community space, a third space.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are how the crossover happened.
You describe corners as architectural, psychological, and social spaces, sites of refusal, revision, and reorientation. What first drew you to corners or these kind of marginal spaces, and what have they taught you about power, presence, and perception?
This is probably my ongoing question in all my work. First started openly studying corners in my master's dissertation at NYU, where I was meant to be describing the fundamental elements of the pirouette, and I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to write my dissertation. I didn't know where to start. And that's what led me to corners, because when you do a pirouette, you spot a point in the room and you have to return your head to that spot to maintain your balance. And
A pirouette, that's like a
Yeah.
turn
it's a
in
spin.
ballet,
It's
a spin.
Yeah, the classical ballet spin. And when you do the spin to maintain your balance and kind of groundedness, you have to pick a point in the room to switch your head to on each turn. And for me, it was often the fold in the wall, the corner. So that was one of the reasons. But then I started looking more closely into corners, and I was studying old photographs of when I did ballet as a child. And there was this particular photo of me and my friends all together in the corner, probably chatting or doing something we weren't meant to. And I realized that corners in spaces are often social centers. I think people like to retract to corners because they're scared of center spaces and like what it means to fill or take center space, which has some quite grotesque history, to be totally honest, and specifically in relation to classical dance. But I then thought about the idea of feeling cornered.
How do you mean in quote times?
It's a huge topic, and I'm certainly not the expert, but in classical ballet, like the axes of the body, like vertical alignment, so getting yourself as high up above the ground and as far across the grounds in kind of line, has certain histories in imperial and colonial structures of how space is occupied, who's allowed to occupy space.
So in a sense, it perpetuates kind of domination and
Yeah.
subjugation through
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah, and what is the perfect way to move one's body?
Like, this is the norm. This is beautiful.
And it's about an individual, like a rootedness of the individual, like the idea of man standing up to look around, like standing up straight to look around and then see what else he can occupy and conquer.
Wow.
It got to the state. It's a long time I wrote this, like a long time ago.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I will return to it and have a better, thorough answer for you. But those are like the first hurdles I can give you.
It's fascinating in regards to corners, and
Yeah.
makes me think of like postmodernity and
Yeah.
how everything is fragmented, and now we're shifting into kind of fractal perspective.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think relates to corners as well, because another thing about corners is if you think about sound gathers in corners, and that's like more the fractal or wave formation. Corners, I like to think of them as a social place, but also they can also be a place of vulnerability where you're doing things that you're not necessarily meant to do, where that means like a space of digression or misbehavior or community or like the offstage, and also just shifting your orientation of how you view a space. If you think about a cube, if you didn't have the corners, the cube would just not be a cube anyway. It would just fall apart.
Yeah,
So-
it's interesting. Pamela Lightsey, she's a Black feminist scholar from Boston University, and she talks about margins, and one person's margins is another person's center, and one person's center is another person's margin. So this kind of feels like you're playing with that through embodied performance as well.
Absolutely. And I think that relates to an interest of mine as well, which is to do like structures of visibility in spaces, like what's visible, what acts of labor are visible, what aren't, who's visible in the space, who isn't, who's allowed to be in the space, that kind of thing.
Your work resists the curator as gatekeeper model, leaning instead toward curator as host, accomplice, or co-conspirator. How does that relational approach shift the dynamics of authorship, visibility, and care?
Yeah,
Which I think we were just kind of talking about.
totally. When it comes to curating little by little, for example, I like to see myself more like a bridge, someone who can be a point of contact. And if someone wanted anyone to sit in and on a rehearsal or any editorial work with writing, I'm more the point of contact and a bridge between the artist and the Brooklyn Peace Center. I'd like to think of myself that way. I really don't like the idea of ever overstepping on someone's artistic process, but particularly as someone who makes work myself and I'm beginning to make work again, I don't want to feel like I'm overseeing. That, I think, is really not something I'd ever want to do. And with that idea of not wanting to oversee or overstep, I also would love in an ideal world, and I have always tried to make this part of the residency, not expect there to be a product at the end of a residency program, particularly with performers. There's the option to share work, or there doesn't have to be a final performance. Maybe there's some kind of talk or nothing, because I don't know. I just think in an ideal world, the residency could be a moment of respite from the other expectations of artistic life, and like a moment to really pick apart an idea, have space to do that, and it not have to be like a polished idea.
It's creative, but not like consumeristic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
I like to think of it as like an anti-capitalist approach, honestly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Tell us about a residency at Brooklyn Peace Center that left an imprint on you, on the space, or on those who passed through it. What made it feel transformative or perhaps unexpected? There's so many. How many residents have we had here so far? And I know we've had individuals and groups.
We've had 7.
7. And it's been over, how long has it been now?
2 years.
2 years. It's great. And these are mini residencies.
Yeah.
These aren't like year long. These
No.
are like a month, 2 months.
A month.
A month.
Yeah, a month. and they're able to share a work if they want at the end of that month with our help. I think a moment that sticks out to me, and two moments that stick out to me, all of the work that's been done here has been amazing, and no one in one head is better than the other. I don't have a favorite per se, but I have images that kind of stand out and that I return to quite a lot in my brain. And the first one would be Neva in their performance here, which was the
first one. Yeah.
First performer here.
It was really joyful, and we had food after chili.
Yeah, Neva's chili was
Her
great.
family was here. Lots of folks. Yeah, it was great.
At the end of their performance, there is a person who's part of one of the communities here. I'm not sure which one, called Sonia.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Sonia. From Garufana.
Which?
She is a Garufana. She goes to the Garufana Mennonite church that meets here on Sunday afternoons.
Well, Sonia was at that performance, and there was a really sweet moment at the end where the performers were leaving the space, and Sonia, who's an older member of the community, stood in the doorway and high-fived all of them.
I remember that.
And that really sticks out to me because it felt like that could have only happened because of Little by Little.
Yeah.
That might have not been an interaction that happened otherwise. Yeah. And it felt like an intergenerational moment of Brooklyn that felt curated by what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful. She always brings her own folding chair.
Yeah.
Wherever she goes.
Yeah.
And we have this poster downstairs of Shirley Chisholm, who is the first woman and Black person, the first Black woman to have gotten electoral votes running for president in 1972, unbought and unbossed. Mm-hmm. She was the congressional representative of this neighborhood. And she has a famous saying, and we have a poster downstairs of her face and the saying, and it says, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." And Sonia was like, "Is that me?" She's like, "Did you put this poster here for me?" I'm like, maybe we did.
Yeah, that's amazing. I believe Sonia did bring her folding chair.
Did.
We put a chair out for her anyway.
Yeah, and I remember that, like, high five. Yeah. So that was very memorable for me as well.
That was a huge one. And I think it was just such a moment.
Intergenerational, intercultural.
Everything.
The whole community coming together at that moment.
It was really a really beautiful moment. And in itself, it was its own dance, which I found kind of lovely. That was a huge one. And then another one was Joanne in spring of 2024. Joanne Can, who is an amazing performance artist, has a background in clowning and acting, some movement practice. She, for her piece, brought a whole kind of
playhouse.
We built a playhouse on site, which went upstairs. So the Brooklyn Peace Center has 2 levels. There's a gallery upstairs and then a main hall below. And we built a playhouse for Joanne's character, Gunny, who's their alter ego. And one moment that really stood out to me was Joanne had brought real grass into the space. And so when you came in, the space was lit blue, but there was this patch of green, real grass in the middle. And you could smell the soil. And there were these amazing hanging installations coming from the balcony. And that had really set the work before it had necessarily started. I don't know. But it was already ongoing before anyone arrived. The work was being played out. And then, we built this amazing kind of playhouse in the gallery space upstairs, which the audience moved from the bottom space to the top without kind of instruction. You had to follow the inclination to follow Joanne.
And there were dozens of people.
There was lots of people, and people were confused. And I like it when artists confuse or confronts an audience and they don't really know what to do and they're not sure. And then you're almost watching the artist choreograph the audience, and then they become
part of the production in a sense as well.
Exactly. So that was definitely another key moment for me. But then I can't pick. I could go on forever.
They're all wonderful and unique.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
I'm looking ahead. What future do you imagine for performance art, especially in Brooklyn? And why this city, and what possibilities do you see emerging here that might not be possible elsewhere?
Well, I'm aware I'm not from here, and so I can't speak on what it means to be from here in a time like this. But I know it's a really difficult time, and funding to the arts is just being cut. There's a lot of scare tactics being used on really important non-profits, arts or otherwise. And it's frightening. And my hope is that in face of that kind of adversity, we can still manage to make work through a DIY way, which is what Little by Little has always done. Surveillance of a grant that feels like it's coming from I don't know, this is wrong. Surveillance of a grant is wrong, but the work can be done in a DIY way and it will be beautiful because we'll come together and do it and make it work. And
it makes sense though too, what you're saying. Like,
right?
Yeah, they can be kind of overreaching or have their kind of parameters, which limits
the work that can be done. I firmly believe the work that you want to do can still be done. It's just a shifting of angles and figuring out how to smuggle that work in.
Yeah, especially now under the current administration and all the arts funding cuts that are happening. So I'm really thankful for your work and just art as resistance, art as liberation, art as community.
Yeah.
And I feel like you've really embodied that and created a whole community here and brought so many communities. And I'm just looking forward to all the work that is yet to be done because it's so important and meaningful.
Yeah, I think art it's funny, people come for the artists first. I don't know why that happens.
They do. Marc Chagall, during the Bolshevik Revolution, he was with them. He was like the propaganda artist, essentially. But then the Bolsheviks were like, oh, you're too much of an artist. You're too expressive. And then they started coming for him. Then he moved to Paris, and then, oh my goodness. So they always come for the artist.
It's an interesting time, but I think in difficult times, some of the best work is made. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like explicitly activist art necessarily or anything like that. Like it can just be what you want. Art can also be just something that you make because you like it and you don't necessarily know what like the performance is, or it's just a question that you're probing over and over again. But yeah, I know there's a future in performance, particularly in Brooklyn. There's such an amazing scene here already, and I'm excited. And I have a nervous excitement about how we can continue with these new parameters. And I think, if anything, it could be a beautiful, troublesome friend. Let's see it as that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for you, Bella. I'm thankful for Little by Little and all of the artists. Thanks for making time for this conversation as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm thankful for the Brooklyn Peace Center. The whole community is.
Yes. Yeah. But how can we follow you?
You can follow Little by Little on Instagram. So it's at Little by Little Brooklyn.
All spelled out one word.
All spelled out as one word.
Great. All right. Wonderful.
Great. You too.
Thanks, Bella. Thank you for listening to Teaching Peace. If today's conversation spoke to you, we invite you to experience the work firsthand. Little by Little continues to unfold here at Brooklyn Peace Center, held in community, with care. To learn more about upcoming performances, resident artists, and ways to get involved, visit www.brooklynpeace.center. And if this episode resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Bring someone along, or just stop by and say hello. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep building peace.